bring up. Let me just find that. Excuse me.
We actually live.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm pleased to see all our guests on our webinar. Let me present myself. My name is Helen. I'm account director at Seductive Mobile.
Let's.
Yeah, we can.
So
we're on live?
Are we on live or?
Okay. Okay, we start. Let me present again myself. My name is Helen. I'm account director at Seductive Mobile. We develop mobile applications and would like to share some of our experience with VPN diagrams and performing discovery phase. I think it's rather actual question both for developers, for PMs, CEOs, founders of startups, and who will be our speakers? First, our speaker will be Andrei Moskalets. He's our PM director. At the same time, he has a great experience on startup founding, as well as project management for teams of more than even 30 members. And the second speaker will be Sophie Blackstar. She is, at the same time, she is CEO and founder of rather promising fintech startup in Denmark. And she is also advisor at Fintech Stockholm Fintech Lab. So I think that her experience on performing VPN diagrams will be rather useful for all our guests. And she will also share some of her experience, and some hints for founders of startups. Okay, so we will start, with our main part of our webinar, with our pros and cons of VPN diagrams. I will tell you more about how to make it definitely more productive and for development team and for our product clients here, and some particularities of VPN diagrams. Okay, let's start.
Yep. Guys, give me a second. I'll start sharing my screen. So we've prepared the presentation. Okay. Yeah, here it goes. Hopefully you can see my screen right now. Let's start with the naming. As the discovery phase for some of let's say startuppers is somewhat of a terra incognita, and its nature is rather questionable in terms of making the things happen as fast as possible. Some of you, I'm sure, have read tons of specific literature, some books written by startup gurus, and you are struggling actually to make things happen fast and get your proof of concept as soon as possible. Figuring out if your product is actually a potential unicorn or it's actually it isn't worth a dime. But however, at this point, we suggest you not to be in a hurry, but do things relatively quick, keeping in mind that the proper implementation is still as valuable as the concept itself. Because having the concept implemented in a sloppy, sluggish way will not provide you with the proper and actual outcome and feedback from your audience. So the key point is to do things right and do things quick, but not being in a hurry. I'm sure the most of you consider the startup as something very agile, something very responsive, and somewhat maybe related to your own creative sandbox. You are trying to bring some brilliant ideas to the market and make the world a better place. But however, what differs great product from potentially interesting but failed idea is that the great product is grounded on both brilliant idea and great business model. So please don't forget the business logic behind your product. If your idea is great, but the logic of your application is not so good, let's say, then you'll have the negative response, and you will never get the proof of concept you want it to be. So the key point is to make things simple, not overcomplicated, but still create a significant product. Keeping in mind both business nature behind it and the brilliance and the glance of its idea. And I'm sure the most of you envision the teamwork and the overall performance of your product this way, because I'm sure every one of you is familiar with the quickness of the Formula One pit stop and the team working as a single organism. But in some cases, let's say in the most cases, it turns out this way. The difference, I think, is obvious, and the goal of today's webinar is to provide you with some framework and with some tool set which will help you to avoid things going this way. Let's first of all define the problem leading us to the, let's say, negative outcome. When you're trying to implement a relatively sophisticated business process, sooner or later, going the way of compromises and building it up from technical perspective or from design only perspective, you'll get yourself in a huge mess. The process becomes sloppy, it becomes unmanageable, and it leads to the rather clunky product. But we all want the product to evolve in the most efficient way. And that's why we should pay attention to the business logic and business process efficiency on each and every stage of the project development. From the start, from the actual discovery phase, and through all the development and till the very release, and then among the maintenance and among the rollout of the next versions. Each of these steps should be backed up by a proper business process analysis and audit. This means that on each stage you have to perform a hierarchical decomposition of your requirements, of your business process, and bring it into significant business cases and trying to do the zoom out of entire business logic of your application. That's when the BPMN diagrams start to appear among your project. Let's figure out what is actually the BPMN diagrams. The BPMN diagram is the shortening of business process modeling. It is maybe hand-drawn or chart-related diagrams, heavily standardized by the proper organizations. Current version, I think it's 2.0, and it differs with the richer standard of symbols, notations, and controls available for you to interact with. And the BPMN diagram is, of course, as any formalizing business logic tool, it lets you to envision the process as a logical linkage of step-by-step flow. Let's see what's the submodels behind the BPMN diagrams. First of all, it's private business process. All of us consider that the one party behind any application is its audience, its users. So the private business process is related both to the user's steps and user's flow, and of course to the administrator's flow, if there is one. Abstract business process incorporates mostly technical aspect of any application, its backend, its middleware, its API, and all the data streams behind the application. And the collaboration business process is something in between private business process and abstract. So it's the intersection of the user's flow and the backend or the middleware. It's the data streams for the APIs, it's the messaging, it's the responses, push notifications, whatever. And let's see the basic example of, let's say the basic case of any modern application. It's the sign-in sequence. As you can see,
can we make it more interactive, probably?
Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah.
But I think that's probably our guests, they don't write questions on our chat. So I have several questions, and then we can proceed with your presentation. So what outputs do you need for starting preparing like BPMN diagrams, like the sample that you have provided here for our audience? Could you tell me more about that? Because in most cases, our clients, they don't know what exactly should they send to us. You know, you will start preparing BPMN diagrams.
Let's say that the cornerstone behind any business process analysis done on the discovery phase for the startups is filling in the link canvas document, the link canvas template. I'm sure most of our guests are familiar with the link canvas concept, and I guess the template for both Microsoft Excel and Google Spreadsheets is pretty easy to find them on the internet. The core thing is to define the problem which the potential product will solve, to define its audience, to define the way the problem should be solved, and to provide us with the brief of let's say the number of user stories behind the key user stories behind the product. It will give any software developing company the vision of the product itself, at least from the bigger picture. It will help us to do the zoom out and figure out the core features and the core components of the product. And starting from the filled-in link canvas document, we can start to design the the foundation of the business logic, the core BPMN diagrams describing the zoomed out flow without digging into details. And here I must say that, first of all of us have to keep the business process management diagrams as simple as possible. Don't ever do the basic mistake of any junior business analyst. Don't try to put everything, every aspect of your product into the single BPMN diagram. It will be huge as hell and totally non-readable. Try to divide the scope, the business logic of your product into separated features. Try to encapsulate the core processes and core services of your application into different BPMN diagrams, and do the cross-linking between them. The most convenient tool for it is, I guess, Draw.io. It's totally free. It's cross-platform. It can be used both among the Chrome browser, among the desktop applications, I guess.
We'll send the link for our guests.
We have both. We have it both for Mac, for Windows users. I'm not sure about the Linux, but it definitely should be some sort of the client for Draw.io for Linux too.
Okay, and let's imagine such situation. So I'm founder of incoming startup.
Yep.
What values can you bring for my startup by using such approach, by using BPMN diagrams during the discovery phase?
First of all, among the very first stage of the development of any project, we should consider the business logic of that project, and we should be always on the same page. Being on the same page means that we should speak the same language. The language of the formal logic, I believe, is that same language. Because any textual representation, any brief document, any mind map, etc., can be translated the way user wants it to be translated. The formal logic scheme can't. It defines the logic behind any business process. The only one way possible. That's it. So for both parties, in this case, it's crucial to have the same vision of the product. BPMN diagrams let us to have it. And of course, it's very comfortable to read. And it's pretty visual for both tech guys, for designers, for founders, for non-tech people at all, for project managers, for product owners, and everyone on the team.
Okay, so let's see your sample.
Yeah. So as you can see, I'm far from sticking to the very formal rules of the classic BPMN diagrams approach, which you can face among some huge corporate standards, huge corporate policies like Microsoft or Procter & Gamble or etc. We prefer the agile way of doing such diagrams, but however, we follow this set of basic and the most efficient rules. First of all, we try to divide any diagrams into different pools. corresponding to the core concept which I've mentioned before. The personal flow, which is represented by the users pool. The abstract flow, which is represented with the systems pool. And among the intersection of it, it's the API or data flow. So here we have the triggering process of the user is being redirected to the sign-in page and facing the form, the sign-in form. And we have the representation of basic and mandatory controls of such form. And the case of forgotten password, the basic case, I'm sure we've all faced for both ourselves or among the team or whatever. So, and we have the, sorry, just a technical trouble. Yeah.
And I also have one question.
Sorry?
So this sounds
okay.
And
yeah.
Can developers use such diagrams?
Yes, that's for sure. The entire BPMN diagram can be easily decomposed into separate tasks for the development team, because as you can see, each part of it, each item among the list can easily be dragged into Jira or Redmine or whatever task tracking tool you might use, and be represented as a separate task or a separate epic at least, and easily be estimated, dataized, and brought to the team by the tech lead or a project manager or even a senior developer, I believe with a middle class one too, because BPMN diagrams are pretty easy to read and to understand. Yep, and of course, BPMN diagrams provide both development team and the QA team with the unique possibility to ask questions, to question everything, because each parameter, each case among the diagram might be optimized and might be implemented in different ways. So it's crucial to define on the earliest steps possible the way of implementation of each particular aspect, each particular feature of the project.
Okay, you can like disagree or agree with my statement. In most cases, clients say that it doesn't work yet, paying for discovery phase, for business analysis. So I can proceed with UX design, and at the same time, I will cut down my development budget. Do you agree with that or not?
No, I totally disagree. For both relatively big projects and for the smaller ones, the situation is pretty similar. Cutting away the proper discovery phase, it's done with the BPMN diagrams or just a plain text representation or whatever, bring us to the huge stack of potential issues. The most common issues among it is reinventing the bicycle all along the development. Not having the core logic defined beforehand leads the team to the conclusion that the team itself, each particular developer, each particular designer, and the project manager himself can define the business logic of the application the most comfortable way for him and for the development team, not for the end user. Please don't try to save some money by not telling the team which way you want to go. Because the business process behind each application is somewhat to be owned by the client, not by the team. Each particular product has to go from business process to the technical implementation of the business process. Not trying to stick the business logic to the limitations of the tech stack chosen and some architectural decisions made by the tech lead. If you want to have the relevant proof of concept, please spend some time, please spend some efforts explaining the team the way you want to go.
Totally agree with you. Okay, so let's sum up your presentation.
Yeah. First of all, I'd like to provide our guests with the set of recommendations of doing the BPMN diagrams the right way. First of all, we should clearly define the scope of the process with the beginning and the end. Each business process has its logical starting point, and its end point, its outcome. So please always put the start and the desirable outcome of the process among the diagrams. The diagrams describing only some elements among the screen doesn't provide the developer and the designer with the actual purpose of the screen. So don't try to cut your timing and to save some money, not putting the goal of the entire business process among the diagram. The second point is you might first map the current business process to highlight inefficiencies before modeling a better way with the BPMN. Let's say you already have some some technical solution implemented. You have the actual business process up and running. It's an existing product, and you want to develop a new version. The best way possible for you to go is, first of all, to run some logical audit of the existing process, asking your QA team and your product owner to take part in it, and try to define the bottlenecks among the existing process. And only then, having those items outlined and put among the list, you can proceed with inventing the new updated business process. Third point is aim for BPMN diagrams that fit one page, even if the page is poster sized. That's actually what I've mentioned beforehand. Don't try to put all the eggs in the one basket. Try to separate the logic constraints, the features of your applications into separate BPMN diagrams and do the cross-links. Don't try to put everything into one single diagram and try to go, let's see what happens. Fourth point is layout sequence flows horizontally, show associations and data flows vertically. That's what I've actually mentioned before. You should always have separated pools for your user flow and for the technical flow, and intersection between them. The vertical part of each diagram is your data streams. It's your technical elements, your UI elements among the screen, etc. Fifth is you can create different versions of the diagrams for different stakeholders depending on the level of detail needed for their role. Of course, let's say CEO doesn't have to dig into a huge number of technical details of the project. He should see the bigger picture. He should see the input, the core flow, and the outcome. That's it. But the CTO, on the other hand, has to dig into details and has to define. Sorry.
So
Okay.
yeah,
Has to define the actual technical aspects behind the different business processes, and the level of detailization of the diagrams to be represented to the CTO, it's much higher. And the last one is BPMN is not appropriate for modeling organizational structures, functional breakdowns, or data flow models. And I think it's pretty obvious because for those purposes, you have data flow diagrams, mind maps, and some other tools. That's it, guys. I'll pass the mic to Helen and Sophie, and I'm waiting.
Okay, Sophie, so now you can proceed.
Yes.
And share, please, your experience, with probably using BPN diagrams, because you also have a good experience, especially with fintech projects, some particularities, of fintech projects, and I think of Nordic countries. So we will be glad to hear.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks very much. Can you see me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Great. Okay. So I'm afraid I'm a little bit blind, so I don't have a visibility of the makeup of the audience. So I will just talk to a general audience. So I'm Sophie. Hi. I'm the CEO of Hive Online, which is a Nordic fintech startup. And I will just briefly describe what we do, and then talk some more general topics around fintech startups in the Nordics and some of my experience of particularly planning and executing programs, because that's more or less what I did. So I'll just try and share my screen. Can you see that?
Button, yes, share your screen, like green.
Yeah, so it's come up.
No, still loading.
No.
Okay, sorry, let's try again. Sorry, this computer's a bit slow. Is it working now?
Yeah, now it's loading.
It's happening.
Good. Right, so, okay. So as I say, I'm CEO of Hive Online, which is what we're calling the financial trust platform. It's an early stage startup, and Seductive are supporting us with the front-end application build. Now, I spent most of my career building banks, but decided a couple of years ago, really, that the last thing the world needs is another bank. So what we are creating is it does some of the things that a bank does, but fundamentally it's about helping small businesses run their businesses. But I'll start with a little bit about my background. So I have, as I said, been building banks for most of my career. I have been running major transformation initiatives in international banks for most of that time. And amongst other things, I have built whole businesses for UBS and Citigroup, amongst others. I've also advised fintechs and small startups in the UK in becoming banks, so that's very much my core expertise. So in building Hive Online, I was fortunate to be able to bring much of my experience. Much of my time has been spent, to be honest, in replacing full stack infrastructure that other people have built, which was at one point cutting edge. and is no longer. And this has created an enormous legacy problem for all of the banks I've worked for, and indeed for many other organisations. So I think that's a fairly common problem. So a big learning that I took away from that is that when you are building technology, and particularly when you are building technology which is emerging, it's very important to make that technology scalable and replaceable. So I'm basing my build on a microservices architecture approach, which means that any component can be replaced without having to replace the whole system. So we're working with a lot of technology partners, obviously Seductive being a very key one, but we're also working with a number of technology partners on the blockchain side, on the authentication side, and artificial intelligence as well. And we're really just concerning ourselves with the core functionality which sits in the middle of it. Because of my experience and because of the platform we're building, we've also been invited to advise a number of global bodies, the United Nations, the G20 and the G7 groups, central banks and governments, on the direction of some of these technologies. And much of the advice we give them is don't put all your eggs in one basket. And go through a lot of use cases before you decide what to do. Because the thing about emerging technologies is that it's very easy to do just that, put all your eggs in one basket and assume you know the answers, and then of course another answer comes out from nowhere, and that leaves you behind. So we're trying to avoid that as we progress our build. So I'll just explain what my core customer facing model does by introducing you to one of my customers. So we are aimed at small businesses, and this is Jon, who's a Danish builder who employs 7 people. And he spends too much time on paperwork, and he has to see his accountant and bank when he should be on site. And he worries about cash flow because customers are slow to pay, yet he has to pay his workers. He'd really like to team up with other small builders like him and take on bigger jobs, but he doesn't know who he can trust. So we try to address the problems that Jon has, which are fundamentally administration, cash flow, and trust. We do this through the online application that Seductive are building for us, which integrates contracts and payments. It also integrates accountancy and banking, so that Jon can manage his finances while he's on site, which means that he doesn't have to do all these visits to his bank and his accountant, etc. We also use the information that our customers exchange with their customers, such as the contracts, whether they've met the contracts, and assets that they exchange, to build up a trust profile, which is based on real facts and not reviews. So there's no bias in those profiles. We also provide contextualized views of these profiles to different customers of trust. So say, for example, if I'm a customer of Jon's, I care whether he's going to turn up on time and build me a good bathroom. So I care about the quality of his work and his reliability. But if I'm a government, I want to know that he pays his workers on time, he's the ethical employer, he pays his taxes, and that he generally behaves well. And if I'm if I'm the EU, I've got a long list of things that I need my contractors to meet. But small businesses like Jon don't have separate administration departments. They don't find it easy to meet all of these requirements. So the platform I'm building will measure the sorts of things that these organizations are interested in, and it provides profiles to those customers as well as the small customers like me. And of course, it also provides the ability for people like Jon to look at other small businesses like him and understand whether they can be trusted. So it helps to build communities of businesses, and people like Jon can then collaborate and work on big government contracts. So instead of building houses, which is what Jon normally does, he could be building a hospital or an estate. So it rebalances the way that communities work, and takes away some of the big company stuff and gives it to some of the smaller companies. So that's my basic business model. I will stop sharing now, so you can see me instead. And as I said, we're building a microservices architecture perspective because I've learned from my long experience in banking that building a full stack end-to-end is usually setting yourself up for trouble. And as, to reiterate what Andre was saying, you really need to start with a very clear vision of what your architecture is, even if components are going to change as you go along, in order to understand how your overall service delivery will look. Now, my service delivery is quite complex because it's a multi-sided platform and we're partnering with multiple partners. But ultimately, we start with the same components, which are, what is the customer journey? Who is my customer? What are they trying to achieve? What does success look like for my customer? And then working back from there to say, well, you know, what can we do to support this customer in achieving their objectives? What does that look like in terms of a service that I will be delivering? What components go into that service? And what do the components of that service look like? So it's really about deconstructing the elements of the service. I mean, I know Andres is a BPMN guy and calls it a process, but I call it a service. And understanding how the components of that can be assembled or disassembled to provide different types of services. One of the challenges that modern organizations face, and particularly fintechs, is that we're all in the ecosystem now. And providing ecosystem services means that you're not always in control of the full customer journey from end to end. You're almost always not in control of the full customer experience. So you also need to be able to understand the customer experience outside of your organization and from an ecosystem perspective. And this is where having a microservices view actually helps an awful lot. I'll just spend the next couple of minutes talking about the Nordic scene. Now, as you can probably tell from the accent, not from around here. I moved to Denmark 2.5 years ago to work with one of the major banks here. And it's a great place for startups, frankly. Nearly everyone manages all their finances online. Money is something that people don't use, or cash rather, is something that people don't use very much. And there is a strong element of curiosity and willingness and openness to new technology, which for a financial technology company like mine is fabulous. There's also a very highly educated population who all speak English, or nearly all speak English, which makes it, again, very easy for international companies to come here and work in the Nordics. I found that the challenges I faced, and these are challenges that are common to fintechs in the Nordics, is that the investment market is relatively immature. So we're having to look elsewhere for our investment money. But again, there's a lot of interest, particularly from the Far East, in investing in technology in the Nordics. So while that's an interesting challenge, and while that means I spend time going to places like Singapore, it's not a barrier to setting up here. So I think, in summary, I think that, you know, the Nordics is a fantastic place from a market perspective. It's a fantastic place, excuse me, to live. And although probably Helen and Andre have much better weather than I do, other than that, it's just a fantastic place to do business. It's very easy to knock on the doors of governments and regulators here. And in the fintech hubs, I represent both the Stockholm Fintech Hub, and I'm also based in the Copenhagen Fintech Hub. We have regulators, the local banks, all of the big banks, representatives of government innovation departments, finance ministries, innovation ministries. I mean, the list goes on. They're all very, very keen and willing to work with us. And those barriers are things that in the UK, I think it would be much more challenging to get conversations with those people. So in Sweden, I'm working with the Ministry for Innovation, the finance guys, central bank, regulators, ministers of the environment, energy, etc. And they're all very, well, relatively easy to access. And very interested in the opportunities that technology can provide, which, as I know from my work with the G20 group and some of the other groups I've worked with globally, is not the case with governments in general. So it's a good place for us to be. Now, well, I've done my 15 minutes, so I'm happy to take any questions or talk about any other particular topics.
Yeah, our participants, they don't write questions, but I have a lot of questions.
Okay.
So can you provide hints or probably tips for founders of incoming startups, how to kick off a successful startup, probably on Nordic market or in general? Yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, in general, anywhere you're going, I think the key thing is to have a very clear vision of what the problem is you're trying to solve. I see an awful lot of startups, particularly in the fintech space, who are extremely clever and have got some great ideas about technology, but they're often a solution looking for a problem. And if you are a solution looking for a problem, the chances are that problem doesn't exist. You need, for any business, you need a market, and you need a reason to exist. And however brilliant your solution is, if the problem isn't there, then it won't come off and it won't get off the ground. So that's number one, is understand what your problem is and who your market is, and and how you're going to fix that problem.
And before the discovery phase, not during discovery phase.
Actually,
like
yeah.
in most cases.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's before you even start. But then as you start to put things together, I mean, I work on agile principles. As I said, I work on microservices architecture. But this whole sort of cult of agile is a little bit overblown, in that you can be agile and still plan. And I think planning is absolutely essential, not just from a financial perspective, but also from a sequencing of work, and starting, as Andre said very eloquently, starting with a clear vision of what you're trying to achieve. Start with your customer problem, deconstruct that into services, deconstruct that into an architecture, deconstruct that into microservices and processes, and just work your way through how this is all going to work. Because it's very easy to get carried away, and I'm as bad as anyone else. I mean, I get carried away by, oh, Python, how exciting, but ultimately that's not really very helpful if other components aren't being built. So planning is really, really important. It's also very important to demonstrate progress, not just for yourself, although I think you are your own most important customer as a CEO startup. But also if you've got any investors, because nobody is going to believe in you if you don't make progress, and you need to demonstrate progress by producing stuff. So producing, designs, architecture, process diagrams, and so on and so forth. So it is very important to set yourself plans for what you're going to do, not necessarily exactly what you're going to do, but how you're going to achieve it, what steps you're going to go through. And to meet those milestones for yourself and for your investors.
Yeah, we know that you live in Denmark, and it was an interesting question. What kind of support does the government provide for fintech, or in general for all startups?
Yeah, so as I say, we're very lucky here in that we've got great access to the banks and the government and the regulator, the central bank. And I guess the first thing there is that being in the hub is very important, both in Stockholm, which actually has a more developed ecosystem than the Copenhagen one, but they both have a pretty good one. We also have access to the academics and the universities who regularly come into the hub. I sit on several councils here where we liaise with politicians, policymakers, academics, the whole spectrum of people who are interested in the technology aspects. And we work together to find solutions for policy and regulation, as well as finding use cases that will be appropriate for the politicians. So I think being in a hub is really important. In Denmark in particular, I happen to know about the legislation here because I live here, we do have some attractive incentives for innovation companies coming into the country from outside of the EU. Less so for EU companies, because it's actually very easy for an EU company to move here and set up anyway. But they have these special innovation grants. You can look them up on Google, where if you're an innovation company looking to set up in Denmark and you're from outside the EU, they have a competitive process where you can enter and get grants and lots of support from the government, and that's really good. It's also a very easy place to set up a business. Everything's online. Most of it's in English, some of it isn't, but most of it is. And the process itself is very quick and very simple. So all of that is very low barrier to entry. So some of the challenges are, I guess, tax is quite complicated in Denmark, but you get yourself a tax accountant. Yeah, I think the immaturity of the investment scene is probably the biggest barrier to setting up, but there's an awful lot of things that make it very easy, not least the fact that everything's online.
Yeah, and the last question, what discovery phase crucial for your project? And I know that you have started, yeah, with discovery phase by yourself, and Andrei assisted us, but was it crucial? Yeah, especially I think we are talking about fintech projects.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
so yeah, UX design is itself.
Yeah, I mean, whatever you're building, whether you're, you know, I mean, as I do quite often do a bit of bricklaying in my garden as well, you know, you need to start with a design. If you just dive into building stuff, I mean, if I just dived into my garden and started digging holes and laying bricks, I'd have a mess. And the same is true of software. You absolutely need to start with a design. And as I said, it's not just so that you know you're building something that works, which obviously is a very important part of it, but it's also so that as you progress, you've got a blueprint that you and all the people who are working with you understand. Now, my team's globally distributed. My CTO lives in Sydney, and my product guy lives in Stockholm, although obviously I'm in Stockholm quite a lot myself. You guys are in Ukraine, you know, we've got teams in the US. So it's really important to have a common understanding of what it is you're trying to achieve and who's doing what. And in order to do that, you need clear designs. So I would say that's really fundamental. And then as you progress, things change. You know, you make different decisions and things happen. But then you've got a record of what you designed in the first place and what's changed, and you know how it's changed and why it's changed and who made the decision and what the expected outcome is going to be. And again, you can measure yourself against that and see what's working. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I don't just think design is important because I've been designing things like banks for a long time, which obviously do require a lot of design. As I say, it also applies to something as stupid as me building a new raised bed in my garden. I need to know how many bricks I'm going to need. I need to know how long it's going to take.
Yeah.
You know,
even it's easier to update some changes on VPN diagrams and on design.
Exactly. Once you've got the design, then you can change it if you need to, but at least you know where you're starting from.
And all of members will be on the same page, as Andrei has said. So I don't have questions, and we're really pleased that you have joined our webinar, because you're really well, you guys, for us. You have great experience with fintech projects. Yeah. So thanks for all our participants who have joined us today on Friday, because probably all of them are thinking just about Friday evening.
Yeah.
But we are really glad to see all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
You're
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.